Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a really fascinating biblical metaphor, Israel as clay. But it's not straightforward. It seems to shift pretty dramatically.
That's right. It starts as this image of, divine shaping, God's mastery. But we're going to track how it morphs into something quite different: instability, maybe even apostasy.
Okay, so what are our main sources for this journey?
We're primarily looking at two key places. First, Jeremiah 18, that's the classic potter and clay passage. It establishes God's sovereignty, his right to mold or even, rework his people based on their response.
The malleable people. Got it.
And second, Daniel chapter 2. This is where it gets complex. Clay shows up again, but it's mixed with iron in that famous statue.
Ah, the statue with the feet of iron and clay. And our mission today, what's the specific angle we're unpacking?
We're diving into a particular interpretation, and it's quite provocative. It argues that the clay mixed with iron in Daniel isn't faithful Israel at all. Instead, it symbolizes apostate authorities, Jewish leaders who compromise with empire.
And that compromise leads to
The persecution of the faithful remnant, those who don't compromise. It's a sharp twist.
So clay is meant to be shaped by God, but here, this specific mixture, it turns destructive.
Exactly. It's a paradox. The materials, iron and clay, they just don't bond. It creates inherent weakness, brittleness, self-destruction, really.
Okay, let's back up slightly. Lay the foundation first, the standard metaphor.
Right. So think Isaiah 64:8. We are the clay, you are the potter, we are all the work of your hand. Israel as the raw material, basically. God shapes them. Obedience means good shaping, disobedience, breakage or reshaping.
Simple enough. Now fast forward to Daniel 2, the statue's feet.
Yeah, the vision describes the feet as partly of iron and partly of baked clay. This usually symbolizes the fourth kingdom, often identified with Rome strong like iron, but divided, internally weak because of that clay.
The imperial strength doesn't fully integrate with this other element, the clay.
Correct. The clay represents a kind of human earthly weakness that just can't fuse with the iron's might. It makes the whole structure unstable.
Now, connect that to the interpretation you mentioned, the clay as apostate leadership.
So this specific reading says the clay isn't just general human weakness or even faithful Israel under pressure. It's specifically corrupt leadership within Israel. Leaders who align themselves with foreign powers.
Foreign powers that, ironically, were sometimes seen as instruments of God's discipline, like Babylon or Rome.
Precisely. Think Deuteronomy 28 or Jeremiah 25.
Hmm.
God can use empires for discipline, but here, according to this view, the leadership collaborates with that power for their own gain, not for godly correction. They co-opt the discipline.
Okay, that really paints a picture, especially thinking about the Roman era. Can we put some historical faces on this clay-iron mixture?
Absolutely. The Roman occupation period is, a prime example, according to this interpretation. You have figures like Herod the Great, essentially installed by Rome. You have factions like the Sadducees or parts of the Sanhedrin working very closely with Roman governors like Pilate.
So these Jewish elites, tied to Roman political and military structures, they are the clay compromising with the Roman iron.
That's the argument. It's a volatile mix, power based on collaboration with the occupier.
But if the clay represents weakness, why does this alliance lead to active persecution of the faithful? Wouldn't it just be ineffective or crumble?
Because the survival of that compromised leadership, the clay authorities, depended on maintaining stability for the iron, for Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone challenging that status quo, anyone calling for faithfulness above political expediency became a threat.
Like Christ, or the early believers.
Exactly. They were seen as destabilizing elements. So the consequence of this clay-iron alliance wasn't just passive failure, it was active suppression. Think of the dynamics leading to the crucifixion or the persecution detailed in Acts, the compromised structure striking out at the faithful remnant.
That's a heavy framework for understanding that period. Now, applying this to the modern world, specifically the U.S.-Israel relationship, that feels like a huge leap. How do the sources navigate that?
Well, proponents of this view see a direct parallel. They interpret modern Israeli leadership or certain factions within it as the clay and the iron. That's seen as the immense political, military, and financial support from the U.S. The vast aid packages, the security packs.
So over $150 billion in aid you mentioned in the prep, things like that are seen as the modern iron.
Correct. And in this prophetic framework, this modern mixture is also seen as inherently unstable. The clay element is often linked to secular or Zionist factions, viewed as prioritizing state power and alliances over say, religious or covenantal principles.
And reporting impartially here, this interpretation then leads to accusations about modern persecution.
Yes. The claim is that these contemporary clay authorities, bolstered by the Iron Alliance, end up marginalizing or even oppressing a modern remnant.
Who would they identify as that remnant today?
It varies, but often includes groups like Messianic Jews or sometimes Palestinian Christians or others seen as challenging the dominant political religious structure.
And events like the recent conflicts, say the 2023-2025 Gaza situation.
Those are often cited as examples. Parallels are drawn to Roman actions, suggesting that the external alliance, the U.S. backing, becomes a tool used internally, fulfilling that destructive pattern from Daniel 2, where alliances meant for security become instruments of oppression.
Okay, let's pause and recap this journey of the clay. It starts in Jeremiah as something God shapes, totally dependent on him. Then, in this specific reading of Daniel, it becomes part of this unstable, apostate mixture leaders compromising with empire, using that power against their own faithful.
A stark transformation of the metaphor. But it's crucial to remember the end of the Daniel 2 vision. There's hope. Daniel 2.44 speaks of a rock uncut by human hands that strikes the statue's feet.
Shattering the whole compromised structure.
Yes, and that rock establishes God's own kingdom, one that will never be destroyed. It's an eternal kingdom where ultimately the refined remnant, what Paul might call vessels of mercy, find their place.
So that brings us to a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. If alliances, even those perhaps intended for protection or discipline, can become twisted into tools of oppression against the spiritually faithful, what does true faithfulness actually look like? What's its ultimate measure, especially in times of intense geopolitical pressure and compromise? Something to think about. Join us next time for another Depth Dive.